This is James Sandy. Today is July 12th, 2024, and I am interviewing Chief Master Sergeant Philip Easton. This interview is taking place on Zoom and is sponsored by the UTA Department of History and Geography as part of the Texas Veterans Project. Morning, Phil. Thank you so much for participating in this project and sharing your story.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Okay, so to get started, where are you from originally? What can you tell me about growing up?
Yes, I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I was there until I was 15 years old. And then the summer going into my junior year in high school, I moved to Irving, Texas, due to all the violence that was going on there in Los Angeles. Lived with my aunt for a year as the family wrapped up selling the house, etc. And then they joined me my senior year, and then graduated in May, and then August 15th, I entered the United States Air Force. So I have a brother. My dad has passed away. My mom still lives in Irving. And now I'm married. I got married in the military. Actually met my wife in uniform, based in tech school. And we were actually in basic training, the same weeks of training. Didn't see each other. We were in the same weeks of blocks of training for tech school and met about 3 months into that. And now we've been married coming on 33 years here in November. We have two beautiful children, wonderful daughters, Ariana and Brianna. The youngest, Ariana, in the Air Force. She's actually just got to the United Kingdom on Tuesday, and got married about 3 weeks ago. And her and her husband are now in UK. He's also an airman, a cyber airman. They're starting their journey. So she's about 6 years in the military. September will be 6 years for her. And then my oldest daughter lives here in San Antonio, about 20 minutes away from us. And she's an occupational therapy assistant, and does in-home health care for majority pediatrics. And then my youngest daughter is an X-ray tech in the Air Force. So that's a little bit about me. And now we live in New Braunfels, Texas, after retiring from the Air Force after 32 years in the Air Force. So September 1st of 2022 was 32 years. And we've been here in New Braunfels, Texas, northern San Antonio, for almost the last 2 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great intro. I'm going to make you go back and talk about yourself a little bit more, right?
Okay.
So again, back to growing up, right? So you said you're in LA.
Yep.
You said you're born and raised there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do your parents end up in LA?
So my mom grew up in Palestine, Texas, so kind of East Texas. And her family moved to California, back in the 60s. And then my dad lived in Crawley, Louisiana, and the same thing. He moved to California back in the 60s as well. And then they met at a fast food joint, not one of the standard fast food joints, but not like McDonald's or something, but one of, I believe it was a taco or burger joint. And they met there, and got married, and here we are, me and my brother. So yeah, they met, their families migrated from Louisiana and from Texas.
How many brothers? Or
Just
brother?
one, just one brother. Yep.
Younger, older?
Older, so he's almost 4 years older than me. His birthday's in December, mine's in October. So for a couple of months, we're 4 years apart, but majority 3 years apart. And he lives up in, actually with my mom up in Irving. After my dad passed away, he lives up there with her. So.
Okay. So you said, before you guys moved to Texas, what do you remember? What was growing up in LA like for you and your brother?
Violence and drugs and gangs was a lot of what was going on then. So my mom did a really good job keeping us involved in either church or sports. So that's mostly what I remember, being at church, probably 75% of the time. And then the other 25%, obviously doing school, but also from an extracurricular standpoint, I'm playing baseball. So I grew up, playing little leagues. My brother was into basketball and football, and that's what I remember. But majority of my childhood was spent a lot of time in church, a lot of time.
It's a pretty good way to stay out of trouble.
It is. My mom did well, did very well.
So did you start high school there, or so you did start high school in California?
Yeah, I started high school there. I was there in Los Angeles, Inglewood. We kind of moved to later on, but Los Angeles, Inglewood are right next to each other. So I was there for my freshman and my sophomore year, and then the summer going into my junior year, that's when we moved, or I moved my aunt to Irving, Texas.
Okay. What was that like moving in the middle of high school?
Yeah, that was probably the toughest transition, even from a military standpoint, or using examples. But I grew up in Los Angeles. Had all my friends right there at Westchester High School, and it was an abrupt move too. I mean, literally, I had two guns pulled out on me the summer going into my junior year. Nothing to do with me at all. I wasn't involved with gangs whatsoever. One time I was with my cousin picking up a cake for a birthday party for one. I think it was a cousin, another cousin or an aunt or uncle. And some guys just rolled up on us asking us what set are we from. We're like, man, we don't gang bang. We don't do that. And we slid on into the bakery, and luckily nothing happened. And the other one, I was literally another fast food joint on Crenshaw, picking up something, and some guys drove by, screeching their tires and with guns, that I saw out of their window, and I just kind of snuck behind a bus stop or a bus bench, I guess. And luckily nothing happened. But a lot of people dying by drive-bys back then and even now. So those things scared me and my mom enough to say, hey, you know what? We need to go ahead and get you to a safer place. So literally, I was like 5 days late for school. I mean, it was that late of a transition, and lived with my aunt my junior year, and didn't play sports, didn't do anything, kind of shut down completely for my junior and senior year, and just still did great in school, but didn't try to do anything in sports or do anything as far as really expanding my friend network. Just wanted to graduate and move on. But I was definitely salty, but it probably saved my life, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really wild story. What year was that you moved to Texas?
1988.
1988. Okay. And then you said your parents followed on a year later?
A year later. So yep. So summer of '89, they came up. So I was living with my aunt my junior year. Mom and dad moved up my senior year, so from '89 to '90. And then in 1990, in August 15th, enlisted in the Air Force.
Okay. How did you come to that decision? Was that something you were interested in as a kid? Yeah, walk me through that process.
Yeah, I knew I didn't want to go to college. Had enough of school. Loved the idea of the military, but I really wanted to go into the Marines, only because of the great advertising campaign that they have. Their uniforms. And my mom was like, not just no, but heck no, right? Because I didn't understand the difference in the missions. I didn't do a whole lot of research. I just knew they looked sharp. And she was like, hey, you're not going to Marines, but you can look at the Air Force. So, the only other person in my mom's or dad's family, or any of my cousins, no one went into the Air Force. Everybody went to the Army or to the Navy. A lot of my cousins went to the Navy. The only person that ever went to the Air Force in my family, and probably still to this day, is my Uncle Phil, who I'm named after, my dad's brother, my Uncle Phil. He was in the Air Force, I believe, from '72 to '76. He's the only member, and it wasn't that drew me. It's just ironic that the person I'm named behind is the only person I can even find any Air Force connection to. But outside of that, so it wasn't something I thought. I'm not sure. Going into my senior year, I was planning to go to Air Force. I just knew, or military. I just knew didn't want to do college anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I would do college. I didn't want to go to school anymore. But yeah, so I made that decision, I think in the spring of '90, and 3 or 4 months later, I was down to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base.
Oh. So you said your mom was not supportive of the Marines, but the Air Force was okay. What was your dad's thought on the whole decision?
Yeah, he was it was kind of agnostic. I mean, one way or the other, right? He just wanted me to do something productive. So yeah, definitely nothing pushing me one way or another. Didn't really have a true opinion of it. You know, he's just always been supportive of everything that I've done. So you know, he didn't push one way or another. But it was my mom that was adamant about not the Marines. And in hindsight, I mean, just now knowing what all the services do, the Air Force is much better fit for me than the Marines.
Interesting. So, at what point did your father pass away? You said?
Yeah, so 2005.
2005. Okay, so
Yeah,
you were in for a while before that happened.
yeah.
Did either of your parents have any military service in their families? Was that something? No.
Oh, families, yeah, neither one of them, but my mom's brothers, she's the youngest of 12 kids. So all of her brothers were all drafted, right?
Yeah.
In the Army. So yeah, so definitely Army lineage on her side. My dad's side, um, we weren't really close to a lot of my uncles on that side, but I don't recall any of them going to the military. Maybe one, but definitely not as many. Because my dad was on the older side, right? I think he was the second oldest. I might be off, maybe third oldest, but you know, he's on the older side. So the younger ones, you know, that weren't drafted or things of that nature. So yeah.
Gotcha. Man, 12. That's a big family.
Yeah, yeah,
Did
yeah.
do you have any memories of kind of talking to those uncles about their service? Because I'm assuming time-wise
Yeah.
they served in and around Vietnam.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Speaking to my uncle Henry, he's the oldest. He's actually still living. He's 90, might be 91 this year. Yeah, so definitely have spoken with him over the years about his experiences, you know, um, in the Army and, you know, how they were treated, you know, post Vietnam, et cetera. So definitely have an appreciation of how well we're treated, you know, being in the military compared to some of our predecessors.
Okay, so you graduate high school. This is what,
Yep.
90, 89,
90. 90. Yep.
Okay. And then a couple months later, you enlist. What's that like? What do you remember about that kind of period in your life leading up to your kind of departure for basic training and all of that?
Yeah, it was pretty quick. So I graduated in May. Texas graduates earlier than California. So I went back to California immediately after high school and went to what would have been my graduation there in Los Angeles to see my friends, et cetera. Spent a couple of weeks there. And then we packed up the U-Haul with trailers, you know, and took the drive from California to Texas. So that summer was pretty busy. And then, you know, right into school. And then senior year was a lot better than my junior year. My family was there. I also was excited about going into the medical field, which I thought I was going to do. So I worked in a hospital under a vocational program through the high school, and got a bunch of letters, you know, from doctors, nurses, you know, to help me. So I thought get a job in the military and medical, but I ended up as an aircraft mechanic. You know, so that transition, basic training was good. I was they call them element leaders, right? One of the leaders within basic training. So I had a great experience in basic training. Tech school, you know, is exciting learning my new job, even though it's not what I prefer to do, but I'm excited to get a vocation. And then also I met what turned out to be my wife. So tech school was pretty cool. So that transition, it was a good experience, good experience.
Excellent. How was I always like to ask this, right? What was, you know, that first day arriving? Because I'm assuming you went to basic at Lackland.
I did, yeah.
What
Yeah.
was that first day like? That first day, evening, showing up and like, oh wow, I'm here.
Yeah, so I mean, a little scary, obviously, basic training instructors, which I turned out to be one later, so which was pretty cool. But you know, it was pretty, you know, a little scary at first, but we settled in. We had a really good flight. Had some really good MTIs, military training instructors. But it was definitely made you second guess your decisions, right? Like, this is what I really signed up for. But you know, understand going through it and then being a TI 4 or 5 years, and understanding the process and why all those things are necessary and how they build up on each other. In hindsight, was an amazing experience, but definitely a little scary for the first few days.
Yeah, I can imagine the shock of kind of, oh,
Right,
here it is, it's actually happening.
right.
Okay, so you said you went to tech school. You end up as your first job as a aircraft maintainer.
Yep, yep,
Is that just
yep.
kind of luck of the draw? How does that end up being where you end up?
Yeah, yeah. So I came in open general, and what that means is that you you're at the mercy of the Air Force and their needs, right? And so that's why I thought that me having all those medical letters would help me get into the medical field. But they call them interview sessions. When you go through basic training, they talk to you, they look at your scores. I had some decent scores in electrical. Therefore, they put me into an avionics troop, so working on radars, radios, et cetera, and within heavy aircraft or large aircraft. So that's how I got selected. So you find out about a week or two before you leave basic training what your job is. And I was selected as an avionics systems technician with a tech school at Biloxi, the Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. So that's how it happened. Air Force picked it for me.
Excellent. And
Yeah,
so, and then you've mentioned a couple times you meet your wife
yeah.
in at Lackland at tech school.
At tech school. At tech
Yeah.
school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? How did you guys actually meet? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. So the first 3 months we were at Alley Hall, which is our electronic principles, and we actually because we came in the Air Force the same day, we were in basic training the same weeks. We graduated from basic training the same day, but never saw each other during those 6 weeks. We believe we were on the same plane going from Lackland to Keesler, because since we graduated the same day, and we started tech school the same day, the same block of training. But for the first 3 months, we never saw each other because I was day shift, she was swing shift. So the way that they set up, you march to your tech school building, and as we were marching away, they were marching too. We would see them coming, but we never saw each other for the first 3 months. But then in January of '91, we moved to a different building that was closer to our living quarters. So there was actually overlap. So we caught eyes the first day of that second block of training, and that was in January, and we started dating in February, and then we graduated in July. So and then we ended up getting married in November, right? So it was a pretty fast moving train, but we knew that it was something special in tech school. We spent all from February to July every day together, and then I had my first duty station, which is I got assigned to Plattsburgh Air Force Base, upstate New York, 30 minutes from the Canadian border. She was assigned to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. She went to her duty station in July. I went to my duty station in July. $400 phone bills back then there was no cell phones, right? So landline $400 bills a piece because we were just sitting and talk for hours and hours. But then we ended up getting married in November. And then she joined me in Plattsburgh in June of '92. So the next year after that. So yeah, that's how that all happened.
Gotcha. I understand, the Air Force is rather accommodating for married couples.
Yeah.
What was it like kind of before you guys got married, kind of the dating, getting to knowing each other with this kind of idea that the Air Force can separate you, probably will. What is the kind of, what are the rules
Yeah.
about that, if there are any?
Yeah. And the rule is that you have to be on station for a year before they'll join you together. So
Mm.
we knew that, right? So, you'll hear a lot of people getting married in tech school, right? So that they can get orders together to their first duty station. If you go separate ways, like we knew the rules, we knew that she was going to be there. We were going to be separate for a year, but we didn't want to rush it. Like if it's meant to be, if it's God's will, a year later we'll still be together, and that's what happened. So we knew the rules. We knew, the challenges associated with it. So I visited her 2 or 3 times during that year. I flew to Ellsworth, to Rapid City, South Dakota, and visited her. I think it was twice during that year. And then we joined back together we had an actual wedding in June. So we got married basically, ironically, crazy story, November 23rd of '91 when we got married. It was actually a double wedding. My brother got married. I was the best man. And then after they were done, just my wife and I came up and we did our vows. So that's our official marriage day. But we didn't have a real wedding because we needed to get the paperwork right to be able to be joined together the next June. So in June of '92, we actually had a real wedding in North Carolina. And so my family drove, and then that's where my wife's family is at, her mom. They're in Kannapolis, close to Charlotte, North Carolina. So that was pretty cool that we get the opportunity to do that. But yeah, that was our experience. You know, just knew that we were going to be separate a year. I took leave of 2 or 3 times, and then she joined me in June of '92.
Oh. That's quite a whirlwind first kind of year in the Air Force.
Yeah.
What was your job at that point at Plattsburgh?
Yeah, so I was an avionics system technician on KC-135s, right? So I worked on the radars, on the radios, and also was cut trained into working some of the navigation equipment associated with it. So, you know, a kid from Inglewood and, you know, Los Angeles, California, and then find yourself working outside a lot of the times in Plattsburgh Air Force Base, 30 minutes from the Canadian border with lots of wind, snow, and cold weather was definitely a culture shock for me, for sure.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the job?
I did. It was very rewarding. You know, I've never considered myself a mechanical person, even to this day, right? But, you know, it wasn't like I was traditionally all the time changing tires and brakes. I mean, that's what crew chiefs do, but we do help them out. I spent a lot of time in the cockpit or outside working on antennas, et cetera, or troubleshooting, which I really enjoyed doing, troubleshooting the wire challenges that you have on the aircraft, and pinpointing where the signal is broken, et cetera, using multimeters. So those things, reading wiring schematics, you know, those things really intrigued me and challenged me, and I really, really enjoyed. But you know, I did not enjoy the shoveling of the snow on the ground, or sweeping them off the wings, or you know, freezing for the external things that we had to do. Definitely didn't enjoy that.
Yeah. Did you leaving tech school, entering this job, did you feel prepared for the training? I mean, for the job because of your training?
I did. I mean, it was 9 months. So I felt definitely prepared. I mean, there were some systems that, you know, they didn't train us on, but when you get to your first duty station, they have FTD, field training detachment, that trains you on the specific systems for that particular airframe. So even after the 9-month tech school, I don't know how long FTD was, but I don't know if it was a month or two or a couple of weeks. But anyway, they prepared us, you know, as soon as I got to my first duty station, for everything that was on the KC-135, right? And then you go out, and then you have a whole year and a half where you get trained by your trainer and sign off all of your tasks. So I felt more than prepared, you know, from tech school, but even more prepared after I got to the first duty station, and then I had a really good trainer.
Okay, so you guys have this first duty station, and then you get married, and then you mentioned that then you guys are together at Plattsburgh?
Yes, so a year later, June of 1992, after the wedding, she came, we drove back to Plattsburgh.
Okay. So what happens next in your career in terms of your duty station, your job? Is this something you do then for this first enlistment that you signed up for?
Yeah, so I continued, we stayed at Plattsburgh all the way to the summer of '94. So once again, my wife and I, we worked together, right? A lot of days we worked on the same truck, working the same aircraft. But then at some point they created 2 different air refueling squadrons. She went over to the one side, I went over to the other. They did a really good job to the best of their ability to keep us on the same shift. But there were times that, you know, I worked during the day, she worked in the evening, or vice versa. But so we continued to do that. But then she cross-trained. She cross-trained into computer operator. So towards the end of our tour, because Plattsburgh closed, it was part of the BRAC, the Base Realignment Committee and Alignment Committee. It closed in '94, but she cross-trained right prior to be a computer operator. So she went to tech school back to Keesler, I think the spring of '94. And then she got orders to Tinker Air Force Base, and then they joined me with her, especially since Plattsburgh was closing. So, our next duty station was Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. I was working AWACS, Air Warning and Control Systems, which was a very unique job for they call them ComNav, Communication Navigation System Specialist, for a ComNav specialist, because many of the systems that was on that aircraft weren't taught in tech school, and aren't on any other aircraft other than the E3C. So that was a very unique. And then like going, like KC-135 has 2 UHF radios and 1 VHF radios. I went to an airframe that had 20 or 30 of each, right? So the amount of work definitely increased, but it was a rewarding job. Did a lot of great temporary duties, TDYs, to great locations, right? So we're part of the drug monitoring for drug trafficking down in Panama. So I went to Panama several different times, and then just a lot of, and that's where I did my first deployment. I know you're asking about that here in a second, but but actually it was my second deployment, because I did do a deployment with my wife while we were at Plattsburgh. So that was more of a TDY than a deployment, but it was 3 months. So I guess really my first deployment was with AWACS.
Okay, and was that to Panama, the first one?
No. So the first one, I call Panama TDYs. They were in like a week or 2 or 3. But my first 6-month deployment was to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. And that was with AWACS. The other one that was in '93 with the KC-135 was a 3-month TDY / deployment, and that one was to Malpensa Airport in Italy, supporting Operation Deny Flight. Right, so all the planes that were supporting that, we would go over the AOR, not we, but the planes that we were maintaining would go over the AOR, refuel them, and then let them do the monitoring or things that they were doing for Operation Deny Flight. So it was a long TDY. Some might consider it a deployment, but my real official deployment was really with the AWACS over to Saudi Arabia.
Okay, on either of those, to either Italy or Saudi Arabia, was that accompanied or unaccompanied?
Yeah, so we got lucky on this one. So, deployments are all meant to be unaccompanied, right? We got lucky with the one to Italy because they literally called my wife and asked her, say, hey, we have the short notice TY coming up. Are you able to go? And she's like, yeah, I'm able to go, but would really like, we just got married, had recently gotten married, and had been there about a year. And you say, yeah, if you select me, I'll go, but really would like to stay here. We just recently got married. 5 minutes later, they called me, asked me. I was like, well, they just called my wife. So is there a possibility we both can go? They were like, well, we're looking for a 5 level and a 7 level, different levels of experience. And we were 5 levels, right? And they were like, well, let's see what we can do. Like 15 minutes later, hey, you're both in. So we both went. We both flew over to UK. That's where we thought we were going. And then we get to UK and they tell us, well, you guys are actually going to Italy to support Operation Deny Flight. So we went there, and as soon as we got there, we're like, oh, you all are the married couple, right? So same thing. We were together in the same hotel for about half of it, and then they had to split people up and split shifts up. So she went to a different hotel. I was at the different hotel, and we were off shifts for a little bit. But we knew that's part of married life and part of shift work. But it was pretty cool how that first one came up. We definitely didn't think we both were going to go together, so that was cool.
Yeah, that's pretty serendipitous. How was your experience in Italy working, around Deny Flight and that whole thing?
That was amazing, right? I mean, your first trip supporting a named operation, right? We had a great team, right? And that's when I learned a lot of crew chief work, helping to launch aircraft, change tires, do things, because if we didn't have ComNav work, we were there just helping out, and that's just such a different environment when you are deployed or TDY. Everybody comes together a lot more than you do when you're at home station. So that was pretty cool. We got to do some travel. We went to Milan, did a lot of great things right around the Malpensa airport area. We went to Venice. That was the first time we went to Venice. So, we were able to do some pretty cool things in the 3 months that we were there and support a great mission as well. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah. So at this point, you have to be coming up on, and maybe I've missed it, kind of the end of your first enlistment contract or whatever. Are you thinking this is something I'm going to continue doing? Was there even a doubt in your mind you were going to re-enlist? What's that process, kind of thought process look like for you?
Yeah, so at that point, even though that was a great tour, I wasn't being really successful as an airman, right? I had a great trainer, but I didn't have a great supervisor at all, right? So, I watched folks around me get promoted. I watched folks around me get awards, and, I was doing everything I knew to do, which was to get my 5 level, be the best aircraft maintainer that I can be, but I wasn't being successful. Back then we had a 1 through 5 enlisted performance rating or report system. I got a 4 out of 5, which means it was mathematically impossible for me to make E5 the first time, right? But I saw my peers around me being successful. So I was really questioning why I wasn't being successful and didn't understand why. So, and that kind of continued all the way until my 9th year, and we'll get there in a little bit. When I got the basic training and got my first supervisor, real supervisor, that told me what I needed to do to be successful, and then the rest is history. But yeah, the first 4 years, so from 90 to 94, so right at the end, I think I had to re-enlist to get the assignment for Tinker Air Force Base, right? Because I did a 4-year tour, so that would have been 94, right when I was leaving. So I'm sure I had to re-enlist to accept the assignment to go to Oklahoma.
Okay. And so, and obviously your wife re-enlisted at the same time as well. Is that something do you remember conversations about that like, this is what we're both going to keep doing? Is that ever something you're like, maybe one or both of us are approaching maybe being done? Or is it always like, we're going to stay and we're going to keep doing that?
Yeah, at that point, we definitely both decided, say, hey, we're still having fun, nothing that we had no experiences that would have been like, oh, we need, one of us need to get out or anything. We did have that discussion later on. We'll talk in a second, while my wife got out at the 7-year mark. But at that point, we both felt like she was being very successful. And we felt like it was something that we should continue to do. So we had that discussion, but it was no long conversation, because we were still having fun, still good money, and knew that there were great experience possibilities in the future.
Okay. Okay. So you re-enlist, you go to Tinker, you're working on the AWACS. What comes after that?
And so after that, well, during that time, we got pregnant with my oldest daughter. At that point, my wife had gotten an assignment to Osan, Korea, and then we got pregnant, and it got canceled. But they said, hey, as soon as the baby's like 3 months old, we're going to send you to Korea. Knowing that, we decided for her to get Yolanda to get out. So she got out at the 7-year mark, right after the day after my oldest daughter, Brianna, was born. And then she enlisted into the Guard. And then started working a civilian job. Now I continued to work on AWACS, continued that. And then in 1999, I volunteered to be a basic training instructor down at Lackland. And I was selected, and we PCS the summer of 99.
Okay. What, outside of kind of the family obligations and kind of the stability, I assume, that comes with that, is that something you had ever thought about doing?
No. Nope, I had no desire. I even think in hindsight, going like, why didn't I? Because I ended up loving it, but why didn't I do like honor guard or do anything, some of the other kind of small steps people do before they actually jump into being a basic training instructor. But I think it had everything to do with my displeasure of bad supervisors. I was on my third bad supervisor. I had made staff sergeant the second time, but I wasn't getting any awards. I just wasn't really fulfilled. And that's the first time that I really considered, whether I should continue on in the Air Force at that point. So I remember there being an email coming out saying, hey, the MTI demonstration team, or the team that comes around that talks about, what MTIs do, is coming to Tinker. And I sat in on one of their briefings, got super excited, put in my package, and 4 or 5 months later, I was down there marching troops around, right? So, and turned out to be the best job I've ever had.
Wow. What was that transition like? Because, the headspace of a basic training instructor has to be a pretty kind of specific. Yeah. What was the kind of preparation training like to transition into that job?
Yeah, so it's a 6-month course. Oh, wow. So, you have to go through and teach all the lessons and get signed off on all the lessons. You spend like half to 3/4 of your day with the training school, MTIS, Military Training Instructor School. And then the other rest of your day, you actually go to the squadron that you're assigned and the trainer that you're assigned in the squadron, and then, finish out the rest of the day with them. So it was intense. I mean, back then we were at 70% manned. So, I mean, a 20-hour day, and I'm not exaggerating, was a normal day. I mean, literally. Yeah, I mean, being at work at 3:30 in the morning and being there till 10, 11 at night, driving home, getting a 3-hour nap and doing it all over again. I mean, and I did that for 3 years straight, that particular cycle. And then my last 2 years, I was a supervisor in my 4th year, and then I worked, it's called Standeval, so standardizations and evaluations, and I ran the weekly parade that we have as the military drill and ceremonies NCO. So I did that for the last year, so my schedule wasn't as crazy. But 20-hour days. So, but they prepped you. They gave you the tools to be successful in that 6-month school. You graduate, and then you're off on your own. So I felt prepared.
Wow, that's a really intense workload.
It is.
And you said 3 years straight. I mean, how often truly you have to get breaks in between training classes or something like that?
Yeah, so sometimes you get a week or two. Majority of times, unfortunately, because we were so undermanned, I mean, you literally would graduate them on Sunday. Graduation was on Friday. They would have their town pass and get ready for transition to their tech school on Saturday and Sunday. And literally 75% of the time, they would walk out the door on Sunday night. And then Tuesday morning, the new airmen are coming through the door. And we did that a lot. So it was the main day that you had a break was really on Sunday. They would go to church. I would either sleep or go to church and come in the afternoon. So Sundays was the main day to kind of catch up, and a little bit on Saturday night. But that's when you got a lot of good training in, right? Either marching or just retraining on dorm stuff. I mean, you did a lot of retraining on Saturdays. But those are your free days, so to speak. But where I caught up on reps was really on Sundays.
Yeah, that's intense. How did you balance that with family obligations?
Yeah, it was tough. It was probably the toughest, by far, it was the toughest 3 years of our marriage. Just because, I make a comment often that if, marriage is like a bank account, right? Invest into it, you go bankrupt. So, I mean, literally, and we had our second daughter in 2000. So we got here in 99. I got there in 99. So 2000, we had our second daughter. So, my wife was at home. She had stopped working when we got to Lackland in 99. So she was at home all day with the kiddos, right? So with a 2-year-old at the time, and then a year later, we had our second daughter. And then I'll come home, she'll want to talk and tell me about her day because she hasn't been talking to any adults all day. Yeah. And, 30 seconds later, I'm asleep, right? So, it just causes challenges with communication. And, I spent way too much time at work, and neglected the family, right? And So those are some tough years associated with that so I wasn't balanced. I tell anybody about balance. Those were the 3 years that I was completely unbalanced, spent too much time at work, and thank God it didn't cost me my family.
Yeah. It's a really, that sounds like a really difficult kind of, again, you use the word balance or imbalance, right? It's a really difficult kind of thing to manage. But you said you enjoyed that job. Is that
Loved it.
You had a good supervisor?
Yeah, I really did. All right. So in 1999, Master Sergeant Ralph Perez was my section supervisor, And he's the first person that told me what I needed to do to be successful in the Air Force. He's the one that sent me to the um, education office. And that's when I started my educational journey. It wasn't 11 years later until I went to my first class, to better myself. He would put me up for drill competitions and things in the community to help me be successful. Because I didn't understand when I was at Plattsburgh or in Tinker that I needed to be involved in the community and bettering myself to be eligible for awards and have a good EPR. I didn't know because I would have done it. I would have done whatever my supervisor told me to do, but I didn't, and I didn't have a good supervisor. So, when I had my retirement ceremony, August 19th of 22, I asked him specifically to come to my retirement ceremony, and I called him out specifically because I wouldn't have been to where I ended up in the Air Force, 32 years later, at the 32-year mark, if it wasn't for him. He's the one that put me on the right track. I won a bunch of awards down there at basic training, had a very successful career, and then my career took off from there.
Yeah, it speaks very much to the importance of mentorship, I think.
Yeah, great. 100%. Yeah.
Which I'm assuming, right, being in that job, you had to become a mentor to all kinds of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not only fellow MTIs, but then I became a supervisor. So that same position that Master Sergeant Ralph Perez was in '99, I became that in 2002. So I was a supervisor for the same section actually. So I had 10 to 12 instructors that I was responsible for, and try to set them up for success, just like he set me up for as well. And then even later, some of the airmen, right? I mean, I don't know how many airmen I impacted, but 60 trainees, and you probably had 6 or 8 flights a year. If my math is right. For 3 years, right? You multiply that times 60. There were airmen later, after they got into the Air Force and got to their first duty station that would reach out to me. And even till today, I get emails, more importantly, probably Facebook messages of people say, hey, you probably don't remember me, but I was in your flight. I remember you doing this. I remember you doing that. And, thank you for your leadership and being an example, and, things that, you don't even know that you're doing. You're just doing what you need to do and who you are. So all that is impacting us. I left there in 2004, right? So 20 years later.
Yeah. It makes sense how rewarding of a job.
Yeah.
Kind of fulfilling that job must be. Okay, so you're still in Lackland when 9/11 happened. What's your recollection of that and kind of the tone and maybe how things changed?
Yeah, I remember specifically. I was at this point I was a trainer. So I was training. His name is actually, he retired as a senior master sergeant, but Jason Bowman was one of my trainees, and he was teaching dust cover bed. It's how you make a bed, hospital corners, etc. And he was teaching me a class. And I remember some people coming in saying, hey, there's been an incident. So we went down to CQ charger quarters where there was a TV and just watching everything that happened. And I remember how just everything changed, right? I mean, just the security, obviously, and our it's called RH&T, the place where we trained out of and the airmen lived in, was very close to the front gate, even though there were 3 other similar buildings that were closer to. But when we went to FPCon Delta and everything shut down, just trying to get, it didn't affect us so much because I was in at 3:30 in the morning. But you never wanted to go home for lunch. I mean, so that kind of impacted that stuff as well. Didn't want to go home for lunch because it would take you forever to get back, and you got certain obligations of getting the trainees to certain appointments. So I do remember just how difficult it was to transition to and from work, back and forth to home each and every day. And trying to calm down the trainees because they're thinking, hey, am I going to war? Right? We're like, you don't have any skills to go to war right now. Right? We still got to send you to tech school, so you'll be okay. But I understand it, right? I mean, you come in the military, not much is going on so much, and then you're in basic training and we have this happen, right? And what's going to be the U.S. response to that? So there was a lot of uncertainty. It had to kind of calm the nerves of some of the trainees.
Yeah. Okay, so at some point you leave Lackland and you're no longer involved with basic training, right? What's the
Yep. So
what's the
yeah,
next step?
yeah, 2004. I got an assignment back to maintenance, to Charleston Air Force Base in South Carolina. So I was there as a section chief, so basically in charge of the maintainers, all the avionics and special, we call them specialists. So if you're either a crew chief or you're a specialist. So I was over the majority, and that was rewarding job as well. I was promoted to E8 at that time, so that was pretty cool. I was also over the QA, so the quality assurance, which is similar to the standard valve when I was at MTI, but for maintenance. And so I did that for a year, and then I was a pro super for the group and over all of the aircraft maintenance that was going on for the entire flight line. So at that time there was a lot of so we worked C-17s, the large cargo aircraft. We were sending out a lot of the MRAPs, a lot of the machinery that was vehicles that was necessary to counter IED attacks, that our soldier, sailor, airmen, Marines were dealing with. So we had a lot of high visibility missions, and at that point, Charleston was the main support for the POTUS, President of the United States, because we were only ones at that point that had C-17. So anytime he would go anywhere overseas, all of his vehicles and everything support, we would load up on this, fly over there to Andrews Air Force Base, get all his equipment, and then follow him all over the world. So we're pretty busy with that. But now there's a lot more C-17 bases on the East Coast. So it's a joint effort in supporting the president.
Okay, so you and Taylor moved to Charleston. How's that transition for you, the wife and the kids?
Yeah, that was pretty smooth, right? I mean, we really, in Charleston was our favorite stateside assignment from a location standpoint. I mean, just beautiful. Had a great mission there. The kids transitioned really well. So you figure 2004, 4 and 7-year-olds, right? So pretty low key, not a whole lot of challenges with kids, et cetera. I mean, friends, et cetera. So that assignment was really, really smooth.
Okay. And so just for kind of timeline's sake, when you go to Lackland to start being an instructor, you said you were in E5, and then when in Charleston you're in E8. That seems like that happens kind of quick.
Yeah. So when I went from as we were PCSing from Tinker to Lackland, I found out I had gotten a line number for E6. So I found out literally I had already outprocessed Tinker. I was at my mom's house, or actually I may have been driving to my mom's house as we were PCSing. So I found out PCSing en route that I got a line number for E6, but I had to wait a year to put it on, right? So 2000, I put on E6. 2 years later, I test for E7. I make E7 first time. So that would be about 2002. I put on, I made, 2002, I made E7. I put on in 2003, and then PCS in 2004. So then I get there in 2004, and then I didn't make it the first time, and I made it the second time. So I think 2006, I made E8 and I made E9 so I made E8 second time, E9 first time, and those were both at Charleston.
Gotcha. And I know it's different, per, duty and kind of place you are in the Air Force. At what rank is there kind of that narrowing kind of, what's the difficult rank to achieve within that process, right? Because there's normally one that's very difficult to pass through to the next.
Yeah, traditionally they say E6, tech sergeant.
most difficult one to make. I made staff second time, tech second time, master first, senior second, chief first, right? So, I'm really good at studying and testing. So, those things really helped, as well as me understanding after I met Master Sergeant Perez what was important. So my records started getting better as well. But tech sergeant probably was the most difficult one.
Okay. How long are you guys in Charleston?
We were there from 04 to 09.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there's an overseas deployment coming.
Yes. So while I was there, I was as the QA superintendent. We were sent to UAE, United. I was sent to United Arab Emirates for a 6 months deployment. So that was really rewarding as well. Because back at that time, because we had, C-17s, back then, they weren't really putting large, heavy aircraft into harm's way, like, in Iraq or Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
They were always in countries surrounding where you could fly in and then fly back out. Very similar to the AWACS, right? We were in Saudi Arabia. So back then in 08, they deployed C-17s and folks that was from my QA unit there to UAE, United Arab Emirates. So that was a great assignment. Both mission and personal. I mean, we weren't too far from Dubai. We were able to do some things on our off days, et cetera. But it was just great being there supporting the missions there associated with it. And I had a great team, great supervisors. So that was a rewarding experience as well.
Yeah. Was that unaccompanied?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yes.
Yeah. How was that being away from the family?
That's probably one of the tougher ones, right? I mean, this is really the first one, right, with kids, right? So this is the first time I'd been away from the kids that long and from the wife. Technology had caught up a little bit. So I do remember Skype and being able to see the family. That was pretty cool. But of the three deployments that I've had, that was the toughest one because, the kids were 2008, so 8 and 11, right? So, I mean, they remember this, right? So, and so that was tough from that standpoint.
Yeah, and when you're on deployment, you have to be working kind of all the time, and so
balancing
those two things has to be difficult.
Exactly. Yeah, we worked quite a bit. We were able to get some days off, but it was a very work heavy deployment, but definitely fulfilling though and rewarding.
Okay. So you just said of the three, was that your last overseas deployment?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
Okay. So then coming back, you're already approaching 20 years, correct?
Right, correct. Yeah. So that's year 18. I made so I come back summer of 08. And then I pick up E9 a few months later. I test and make E9. And then I get non-volunteered to be assigned to Misawa Air Base in Japan.
Okay.
So we pack up March of 09. We end up in Japan, in northern Japan. So 10 hours driving from Tokyo. It is very rural. As soon as you get off the plane, you smell manure because there's a lot of, farming going on, but we loved it. The people there in northern Japan and Japan period are absolutely amazing people, amazing culture, amazing society. We loved it. We were there for 3 years. All right, so I was an aircraft maintenance unit superintendent. So I was responsible for about 22 or 23 F-16s. I did that for a year. And then my second and third year, I was actually the squadron superintendent, which is 2 AMUs together for about 45 F-16s. And our primary mission there was making sure that anything going on crazy with North Korea, that we were, postured and ready to go if called upon.
Yes, that's probably a pretty high state of readiness, I would guess.
Oh, yes, constantly. Yep, constantly.
Did your family enjoy that deployment?
Yes, we really, really enjoyed it. Did have some challenges there during that time. So March 11th of 2011 was the tsunami and earthquake. that happened. So Operation Tomodachi, Sendai had the nuclear plant that was leaking um, into the sea. So that was definitely a challenge towards the end of that tour. So, but all of, from March '09 all the way to March 11, we loved it. We did a lot of travel. The people there were amazing. The job was tough. I'm very busy, but it was a great, rewarding experience. The girls were doing well in sports, so that was good. But things definitely changed on March 11th. After that earthquake hit, I was a 7.4, right? So very scary time. We really didn't know from day to day, because we lived off base, whether we were going to be able to have propane, which, was the heat as well as the cooking. So there was times and then I had to leave because we couldn't fly airplanes because of being respectful to the Japanese. My whole unit picked up and went to Korea for a month.
Oh, wow.
And they gave the opportunity for dependents, so my wife and kids to come back to the States, but they wanted to stay. But we knew that there could be challenges with food, as far as being able to get high quantities of it, because they had to be flown in. Nothing could be driven up because the highways had cracks, et cetera. So we're dependent on the military to fly it into the base because the runway was good. And then potential challenges with propane and, getting things and gas off base. I mean, all those things were unknown for quite a while. And then we had to leave. But it all worked out. But that was towards the end of our tour, because we left December of 2011 for Kadena Air Base in Japan as well.
Okay, so just new station in Japan.
Correct. So I was selected to be the commandant, so basically the principal of the NCO Academy or the PME Center, Professional Military Education Center, which was responsible for both our Airman Leadership School, which provides education for it's a requirement for our new E5s. To be an E5, you have to go to this school, and then we also have a NCO Academy, which is mainly for E6s. But a requirement to be put on E7. So I was the principal commandant over both of those schools for a year. So all of 2012. And that was second best, probably next to being an MTI.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty fun job.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys, sounds like you and the family really enjoyed being in Japan.
Yes, those 5 years were amazing. If anybody asks us what's our favorite assignment, we always, Charleston stateside, and then kind of a tie between Germany and Japan. But I think Japan for sure, Kadena for sure, would definitely, because it's like it's the Hawaii of Asia, right? So we absolutely loved it. But the people is what made it. The Japanese culture are absolutely amazing.
That's a pretty good descriptor, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so then after that, you just mentioned Germany. Is that the next stop?
Yeah, so we went to Kadena there. We were there for 2.5 years. So I was a year as the commandant. I was a year over a large group, mission support group, and then I was selected for my first command chief job. So you have to go through a nomination process. You got to go through an interview process to be the top enlisted person at the installation. So I was selected to be the command chief at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. So in November of 2011 and 2013, we PCS. So and that was a good assignment, but it was definitely a tough transition for the family.
Yeah, Japan to Montana, that's pretty stark.
Yes. And we PCS'd in the middle of basketball season or the middle of the school year. So my daughter was in her junior year doing extremely well in basketball in Japan, and then got to Montana and was benched basically, right? So just getting the new person on the new team, improve yourself and all those things. So, and then there was challenges when it came to into from a racial standpoint,
Mm,
right? There was just kids being kids, but kids not being used to being around African Americans
mm.
and some of the challenges associated with that for both of our kids in middle school and in high school. So it was definitely a challenging assignment when it came to that. But
Yeah,
they're resilient and they push through it, and life lessons, right? So
gotcha. How long were you guys there?
for 15 months, we got there in November and we left in June of 15. So yeah, it's about 16 months or so.
That's quick.
Yeah, so I mean, most all of the command chief assignments, I mean, kind of like the commander's assignments, they're all like 2 years.
Mm,
Sometimes they move you early, right? So,
okay.
um, right. So I just happen to get blessed, as we'll talk about these next 4 or 5 assignments, is that they all happen to be in Germany, but it's 4 different jobs. They just happen to be 3 of them happen to be at the same base. So we really got lucky associated with that. But most of the command chiefs, when you talk to them, they'll all be 12 to 24 months. And then all the commanders, that's their entire life, right? So
Yeah.
our kids, I think we have 8 or 9 different assignments, but probably 14 or 15 different houses, right? Because we moved into different houses as we moved different positions, or they were upgrading houses for us. So we've moved a lot over these 32 years.
Yeah. Gotten pretty good at packing everything up.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like you guys really enjoyed Germany. What part of Germany were you in?
Yeah, so we were at Ramstein for 4 years. So they're in Kaiserslautern, in Ramstein, Miesenbach, the 2 cities there. I was the 86th Airlift Wing Command Chief there. Started in 2015. And I did that for about a year, and then I was selected to be the 3rd Air Force, so the next leveled up for the Numbered Air Force Command Chief. Did that for about 8 months, and then I moved into be the USAF Africa, so the U.S. Air Forces in Europe and Air Forces Africa Command Chief. So all the airmen in all of Europe and all the airmen in all of Africa, me and the boss were responsible for, and I was that from February of 17 all the way till summer of 19. So about 2.5 years there. So I got to travel all over Africa. I got to travel all over Europe, visiting our airmen and working partnerships with our European and African allies.
Wow. Sounds like a huge job. How would you describe what your job was at whatever 3rd Air Force or USAFE?
Yeah. So at 3rd Air Force and USAFE, very similar jobs. So you're responsible for all 8 wings that's in Europe, and the ones that are in Africa. And my job and the boss's primary job are going out, seeing the airmen and the challenges and successes that they have, and trying to remove roadblocks, whether it's policy, through manpower, through money, and being able to remove those roadblocks. I mean, that's what we do. Right. And we took pride in that, and had a lot of successes and a lot of challenging days too.
Yeah.
But that goes with leadership. But that's what both of those jobs, and really any command chief, even when I was at the 86th Airlift Wing at Ramstein, it was just for the 8,000 airmen, versus the 32,000 airmen in USAFE, or what turned out to be my last job, the 80,000 soldier, sailor, airmen, Marines, and Guardians in all of Europe, all services. Your job is to make sure that they're getting everything they need from a mission standpoint, from a care and feeding, housing, making sure that if there's any policies that we can advocate on, because, we go to Capitol Hill to testify, at least the boss does, and I'm there with them to talk about some of the challenges that money can help or policy can help. And that's what we're there. We're there to be their voice, to make sure that they can execute the mission and have a great quality of life.
Yeah, the responsibility / authority of that sounds really immense. Can you I know there's probably lots, but can you think of one kind of really interesting, difficult challenge you dealt with in either of those kind of really big picture jobs?
Yeah, so security, right? When you think about 21st century, right, we're dealing with drones, right, and still are dealing with how do you deal with drones, over a secure area, right? Yeah, it's easy to protect the gates, but now with technology, how do you deal with that, right? also making sure individuals trying to, we call them gate runners, individuals that come up to a gate, maybe lost, maybe with good intentions or maybe with bad intentions. How do you deal with those? Making sure that we have, our personnel secure, right? That's our responsibility, right? These parents and they send their kids over to us and expect us to protect them, and that's our job, right? So we took those things serious, and we had some challenges in those areas, just trying to stay on top of technology and stay on top of folks with bad intentions. So so security we spent a lot of time on that while I was at USAFE.
Yeah, and the Air Force has a pretty big footprint in Europe and Africa, I would imagine. So it's a lot of ground to cover.
It really is, and that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem, right? Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you said, I think I heard you say up until 19. So we're now approaching what your final posting is going to be.
I know. Yeah, my final. So I was blessed to be selected as the U.S. European Command Senior Enlisted Leader. The entire Department of Defense is spread out into geographical areas, and they have a commander, four-star general, and a senior enlisted person that's responsible for all those areas. So I went from being responsible for all the airmen in Europe to being responsible for everybody in Europe, regardless of service. So whether they were a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, a guardian, or they come over part of the Coast Guard, whoever came into the AOR, area responsibility, the boss and I were responsible for. So on the average day, it was about 82,000 people. Right. And then also all of the NATO nations where we helped in their development. So I would go visit the top enlisted person for each country and did conferences with them and had office calls with them. So I was on the road a lot, traveling for all of Europe, and then also making sure all of our service components, so the Air Force, the USAFEs, and the Army and the Navy and the Marine equivalent, their services, and then any challenges they were having that affected mission, quality of life, policy. The boss and I would go every year to Capitol Hill, and he would testify and talk about some of the challenges that we're having and how they can help. So now it wasn't just an Air Force component; it's entire Department of Defense. So that was a 3-year job, and we loved it. Towards the end of it, Ukraine broke out, right, and Russia. That's part of our responsibility within U.S. European Command. Leading up to the invasion and et cetera, and Crimea and just all the things that's going on in that AOR, we had to have answers for our plans and strategy. It was definitely a busy 3 years for sure.
Yeah. So you make E9 at some point. What is your rank when you're in those jobs?
Yeah, so all E9. So you're still a chief master sergeant, but we have special positions. As an E9, you can be a command chief, and all those are command chief jobs. They just call them command senior enlisted leaders, the combatant command, but it's still E9. You can't get any higher than that. Okay. But there are different levels of E9.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I didn't want to. I was making sure I didn't introduce you incorrectly at the beginning there.
No. Chief Master Sergeant good.
Okay. So, personally, when you're kind of entering into, this first kind of really big command job, right? What's that feel like for you? I mean, is this something you ever expected that you would kind of get the chance to do?
Yeah, as I was growing up, I always wanted the opportunity. I mean, I've always been one of those people that, if there's things to achieve that I enjoy, let's get after it. And I remember when I was at Charleston, the command chief there was Melvin Willis. And I was like, that's the kind of person I want to be very personable. But if you need him to get down to business, he can. If you need somebody to remove roadblocks, he can do it, right? And I always wanted to be that type of person. So to get the opportunity to be able to do that, kind of drove me, and I got there as a master sergeant, right, to Charleston. That was something I always wanted to achieve, and to get that opportunity, 10 years later or so, was pretty awesome. So it was definitely a goal of mine.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got this last kind of really big job. Ukraine, you said, is escalating, right? But this is coming out essentially kind of as you're leading
Yeah,
towards retirement.
correct.
And I always ask this to, individuals who are in these kind of really lofty positions, right? Retirement, how much of that is your decision versus the Air Force?
Depends. For me there was only one other job that I was eligible for, which was Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, which I was blessed to actually be able to interview for.
Mm,
So I knew that if I didn't get that job, I had to get out. And it's only a 3-year tour, right? And anything over 30 years, you actually have to be approved for, right? And you have to work for a 3 or 4-star general to be eligible for it. So, I knew that it was towards the end of the road. I interviewed for Chief Master Sergeant Air Force during COVID, summer of 20. So I had been in the job about a year. And I knew when I didn't get selected that, 2022 was going to be the end of my tour.
yeah,
Which I was completely happy with, as far as had a very successful and rewarding and amazing career. So
yeah,
the timing was perfect.
yeah, 100%. So what's so you said you retired in 22, right? What do you remember about that day, that moment, right? What did that feel like?
Yeah, the amount of stress that I didn't have, right? So all those jobs starting in 2000, all of them, but especially I think started in 2013, when I became a command chief, just different. It raised up the level of stress and expectation. A lot of speaking engagements, a lot of glass doors, as far as glass windows, as far as, expectations. So I just remember, when September 1st, 2000, and probably before that, because I was on terminal leave a little bit before that, I left the position on June 6th, of 2022 from UCOM. And I remember, that change of responsibility and just thinking, the stress will never be this high. Right. And then anything that I do is because I want to do it, right? And because I have to do it, right? I mean, so, because a lot of speaking engagement things are just expected. It's not like you can say no, right? I mean,
Yeah,
people ask you to come speak, you speak. And I enjoy doing it, but the preparation and the stress and, not wanting to fail, mounds on you over the years. And I remember that not having that feeling and not having that feeling even now, 2 years later.
yeah. Okay, so you retire in 22. And I want to talk about what you're doing, what you've done since, what you kind of want to do, because you're still a young guy.
Right.
But as we talk about kind of closing out your career in the military, and I understand this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What was your favorite part of serving? If you could, what comes to mind when you hear that question?
100% the people, right? Being able to help people achieve their goals. Right. And, I have a kind of a mantra. It's called mentor, mode, develop. Right. I love to mentor, mode, and develop, and help people. Um, that's what my passion is and what my purpose is. So, being able to remove roadblocks or help people with their career or mentor them or, help them through a tight situation or talk to them about marriage and the challenges and, the goodness of, all those things and experiences I've had over these 32 years or whatever point that was, I was talking to somebody, has really been the best part.
Hmm, okay, that's not an uncommon answer when I ask that question
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So in the inverse of that, what about a low point, right? And then what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah. I think a lot of some of the low points are, just looking and seeing some of the challenges that our airmen are having, even with marriage or, I had a really, really close subordinate that committed suicide December 3rd of 2020. And he actually worked for me when I was at USAFE. I hired him on to be my executive assistant when I was at USAFE in February of 19. So then I left in August of 19, but we still stayed very close through COVID, um, just talking over the phone or WhatsApp or whatever. So you think about those points, and leaving his two boys behind uh, and his wife and things of that nature. So, I think about some of those points. I mean, that was the closest one to me, but as we know, is not uncommon, unfortunately, in the military. So I've experienced it quite a bit over my career. So I think about those points, right? There's a lot of greatness, but the stress and everything that comes along with military life and deployments and things of that nature, they weigh over the years, and the mental health challenges that people are having. And I just think about some of those second and third order effects of being in uniform that are a little bit different than your regular civilian job, and the impact the military has on that. And those things, make me sad when I think about them.
For sure. And, your positions were rather intense the way you described them, and kind of all consuming, right? And I wonder, since leaving the service, has there been a bit of decompression where you've kind of remembered things that you probably didn't have time to deal with when you were dealing with them?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I mean, definitely a time of decompression, but I can't think of anything over these last 2 years where, since I do have time, because, I work from the house, I work remote. So I only go on the road maybe 2 or 3 days a month versus 2 to 3 weeks a month. So I have had time to reflect, but nothing has come back to me, in these 2 years.
Okay. So I think that's a good segue real quick, right? So what have you done since you left? What are your plans kind of in your post-military career?
Yeah, so two things that we've been blessed to do in the last 2 years. The first one is I was blessed to be connected with the American College of Financial Services, that has a Center for Military and Veterans Affairs that provides free scholarships for active duty, Guard, Reserve veterans and spouses that are interested in financial services, right? So if you work for Edward Jones or any other company, Penn Mutual, and you want to get some education, and you want to be a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, we have that designation and education that here at the American College has been around for 97 years. And we have money from our gracious sponsors to provide free scholarships for our community. So that's what we do. We continue to get more money, and we continue to get the word out so that individuals can take advantage of this. Because as you know, with 200,000 people transitioning every single year out of military, and, trying to find jobs and prevent homelessness and some of the mental health challenges and et cetera, giving them the right education and the right opportunities and the right network for those that are interested in financial services is the void that we try to fill. So I'm the managing director for our center, and we continue to work on getting more money and for scholarships and provide free education through some of our partnerships with some of our other companies when it comes to military consumer financial education. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. I was blessed to have a smooth transition. So I finished June 6th out of UCOM, got back here July 7th. We spent a month over in Europe, waiting for the boss to retire and go to his ceremony, et cetera. And then August 1st, I started. Right. Wow. So that's not the way it was planned. Ukraine had some impact on it because the boss got extended and we had to move some stuff around. I was planning a 3-month break, but ended up with a 3-week break. But we started August 1st with the American College, and it's been a great transition. And, working remote. And the other thing I'm able to do too is, continue working with the Air Force. I'm asked to come out and do speaking engagements, things of that nature, from my previous positions. And I'm able to do professional development, once again, our passion, for the Air Force, through several different ventures, which has been pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing service. And so that's a really cool thing you get to do afterwards, and continue a lot of the work you've been doing as part of the Air Force, it sounds like. So you mentioned right at the beginning that one or several of your children are also serving?
Yeah, our youngest daughter, Ariana. So she enlisted in 2018. So she's coming up on 6 years here in September. X-ray tech. And she's in the UK as of this week. So they're getting houses and in processing and doing all the things that her and her husband need to do to get settled there. So he's a cyber airman. They're at Lake and Heath and Mildenhall. So about bases that are 15 minutes away. He's at one, she's at the other. And they're buying a house, hopefully somewhere in the middle. But yeah, she's enjoying it, loving it. And at the end of this tour, 4-year tour, she'll be at the 10-year mark, and she'll have to make a decision. She said it's, kind of like everybody, if you go over 10, you might as well do 20. And if you're not going to do 20, then you probably need to go ahead and get out, right?
Yeah.
So her and her husband will be making that decision at the end of this tour.
Nice. What's that like for you having one of your kids serve?
Oh, it's pretty awesome, right? And to have served together, right? So we served together for almost 4 years. So that was pretty cool. Her being in uniform at my retirement ceremony, those things are just memories. And we never thought she was going to serve. We thought maybe my oldest daughter, but definitely not my youngest daughter, just from growing up. And she came to us like, what was it, February, March of her senior year, and was like, hey, me and my friend, we want to take the ASVAB, the test. We're like, you're supposed to study for this thing, right? Oh, yeah, I know. We're just going to take it. She didn't do that great on the first one, but it still motivated her. She said, okay, I think this is what I want to do. She studied, got some great scores, and was able to get into the X-ray field. Which is a very competitive career field. So she was blessed to be able to do that as an X-ray technician,
wow.
Radiology.
Yeah, the family tradition continues, right?
It does. Yeah, my wife served, I served, our youngest daughter is serving, and our oldest daughter wants to not come in the military, but be a contractor for the Department of Defense when it comes to physical therapy and occupational therapy. So, so I just love the heart our daughters have for helping others, right? Kind of what me and my wife do, right? In professional development and helping out others. They have that same spirit, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So as I got some kind of big picture things I want to ask as we wrap up here.
Okay.
And I have not been surprised by an answer to this question yet, but would you serve if you could do it over again, and would you do anything different?
No, I would 100% do it again. The 32 years were absolutely amazing. The only thing I probably would have done differently, but it obviously wasn't God's plan, was to be in the medical field, right? Probably would have waited for a guaranteed job. Not that I knew about them, that there were guaranteed jobs back then, but I wouldn't have met my wife. So obviously going the aircraft maintenance track was God's plan, and so happy that my wife and I met. But not knowing that, and my desires would have been just knowing about the system a little bit better, about guaranteed jobs and where my passion is. I still love the medical field, still love it. But other than that, no changes.
Okay. And I'm intrigued, right? So you enlisted in, what did you say, 1990?
Right.
How has the Air Force changed from your perspective in the 32 years that you served, right? You've seen a lot of it. So I'm intrigued to see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so I think obviously the number of airmen we have in Air Force, right? When I came in 1990, there was 900,000 airmen in the United States Air Force. We're about 320,000, 330,000 right now. So the Air Force is a third of what it was when we came in, right? And I think the operations that we support have increased, if you think about over the years, right? So the mission sets have increased, even though we had the Cold War and there's a lot of deterrence, right? But there's been a lot of actual operations if you count over the 32 years that I've been in. So that's been the biggest difference, is just the amount of people that have been around to do the work that's necessary to continue to make you successful. But technology has helped, right? Technology has grown that 3 times fold as we've decreased 3 times. So to me, that's the biggest thing. And I think as society has changed, the military, not just the Air Force, but the military has had to adapt too, right? You think about it, tattoos or, whatever the topic you can think of. We've had to adjust our standards to be attractive to the civilian population, right? So you've seen that switch, and that's just not the Air Force. The entire Department of Defense has had to change standards wise as far as over the years. So that's probably the biggest difference I've seen is just the number of people and the difference in the standards.
Okay. So just a couple more here. And broadly, I would ask, what impact has your service had on your life? How would you describe it?
Oh, it's made me who I am, right? I mean, I think about who Phil Easton was in 1990 and who I am today. All the jobs that I have, as far as just being a really standards driven person and, very strategic and very structured and very organized. I mean, I was a little bit of that, growing up, but it changes who you are. And to me, to a good point. And it really has created me who I am, right? And I'm a better person and a different person because of the military, right? And love the person I've become, and being self-aware and just all the things that you learn from all your training, right? We just get a huge amount of training, both on the personal and the professional side, but the years of professional military education that works on the people side and the soft skills, all those things have really, translated into me being a better person and a more self-aware person and, treating people with grace and dignity and things that, just have been instilled in you and the core values over the years and how those values, change you and shape you. So I am who I am because of the Air Force.
It's a really great answer. So, and I think because of that, and then what you did in the Air Force, I can't wait to hear your answer to this, right? What advice would you give to young people entering the military today?
Yeah. First thing I'll say, understand what the Air Force is and how to be successful. I think about the first 9 years. I had no idea. I don't put that all on my supervisors. I put that on me too. It was written. I didn't read it. I didn't ask the questions. I expected somebody to tell me what to be successful. And that's what I took pride in as a supervisor, when I didn't get that my first 9 years. But understand the whole airman concept of the Air Force, what you need to do to be successful, and then find a mentor. I wish I would have found a mentor earlier in my career, right? I just happened to get Master Sergeant Ralph Perez in 1999, right? I could have gotten another bad supervisor and this all could have ended differently, but, find out what you need to do to be successful. Find out what you're passionate about, right? Find out what your purpose and passion is about, and make sure somebody in your organization, this is on supervisors, but if you're not getting it, find out what you're doing in your job and how that translate and results in success at the higher levels. My point is like, I wish somebody would have told me as an aircraft maintenance technician in 1991, hey, when you fix this radio, when you fix this radar, when you're allowing the actual aircraft to get off the ground here at Plattsburgh, you're actually allowing that pilot to be able to do their training sorties so that when they are called upon to go downrange, they're able to go, because they can if you don't get this plane off the ground. But he may not be available or may not be able to get the sorties in that he or she needs. Just being able to connect the dots of what I'm doing and how it impacts the mission at the squadron, group, wing, MATCOM, numbered Air Force MATCOM, and a combatant command level. And I took a lot of pride in connecting those dots when I was out in the field at USAFE and at UCOM. But, being able to do that or asking those questions, I wish the younger me would have asked all those questions, both of those questions, how to be successful, and then how does what I do each and every day, make a difference. And, and having the answers to that would have really helped me my first 9 years.
Yeah, that's tremendous advice. Okay, so as we close this out, right, is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't ask you about, that I didn't cover? You have a postscript?
I don't think so, man. I think you. I think you had some great questions. I reviewed all 40 plus that you sent, and, which was good. I mean, it had me thinking ahead of what you were going to be asking. So, no, I don't think so, man. I think you answered, asked everything, and great interview.
Okay. Well, Phil, I really appreciate again you giving us your time and sharing your story with us. I truly appreciate it.
Too easy, man. Thanks for the opportunity.